What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Week 1 UFL Breakdown. I'm here with Millionaire Maker winner and one of the winningest spring football DFS players of all time, Neil Orfield. Neil, how are you doing? We are so back.
We are so back. Yeah, I am ready. I'm excited. To MLB opening day started in 1 minute. So MLB lineups lock in 1 minute. I did that. Those lineups came out hours before the slate started, which I'm not used to. Doing NBA DFS, it was like I was just all done an hour ago. So that was fun. And then we get UFL starting on Friday, 3 days of UFL, which I don't think I love that. I wish it was the usual schedule of just 2 games Saturday, 2 games Sunday, or like pack it all in on one day would have been my preference. But still just excited to have UFL back.
Yeah. Really great week for gambling with MLB opening day and, of course, spring football kicking off. In regards to the schedule change that Neil mentioned, games will be starting Friday nights this year. We'll talk about some of the DFS implications for that here in a minute. But before we get into the games and, like I said, some lineup construction thoughts, some of the implications of games starting on Friday, I just wanted to get a couple housekeeping items out of the way. If you're betting player props or playing DFS, you're really going to want to subscribe to either our UFL package or our all-in package over at fantasypoints.com. The all-in package includes UFL, college football, NFL, and the Fantasy Points data suite. It's a really great value. You can save 20% on that with promo code ALLUFL. But here's what you get in our UFL product if that's all you're looking for. You get projections for every player in every game. You get main slate DFS ownership projections, a weekly written breakdown of the DFS slate. My week 1 breakdown is already live on the site. That is paywalled to subscribers only this week. Some weeks it may be free, but this week in particular, I thought I had a lot of good stuff in there, so we kept it paywalled. You also get access to our paywalled Discord. This is a huge value add in terms of our subscription value. I provide notes on any coach speak I find, insider info, and breakdowns of single game and Sunday only DFS slates. It's a really great place if you want to ask me any questions or just interact with some of the other great people in there. A lot of pro DFS players, a lot of great gamblers in our paywalled UFL Discord. You also get our official picks for player props. Those will also be listed in our paywalled Discord. Last season, we went 33, 22, and 2 for a plus 31% ROI. Speaking of props, Neil, ESPN Bet, DraftKings, and FanDuel have all listed player props in some capacity for UFL today. I mean, this is incredible, and I think is really going to make our UFL subscription. It's $100 for the full season. I think we're really going to be able to get some value out of that, given all the sites that are listing props. Last year we didn't get props until week 6, so we should be able to get a lot more action down this season. ESPN Bet especially has a good offering there. Neil, before we get into lineup construction, I just wanted to give a quick personal note here. Really grateful for everybody who watches this show, who interacts with me on Twitter, on Discord, all of that. I am very fortunate. This is some of the most fun work I've ever done in my entire life. And I really couldn't do it without all the great people who watch this show, without, Trey helping produce the show, without you co-hosting with me, without Chris Wecht, helping in the background with the projections and all the data. So yeah, thank you guys so much. This is going to be a really fun year. I absolutely love this stuff. Hopefully that shows in my work or how I talk about it. Yeah, Neil, how are you feeling as we get into things here?
I'm still feeling like a little bit rusty. Like I told you before the show, I've listened to, 4 or 5 hours of content related to the UFL over the past few days. I've read a few articles, and I still feel like I don't totally have a handle on every situation. Like I don't totally understand every situation, but I feel pretty good about where I'm at. Excited to get into it. Of course, it's always going to be once we have a week under our belts, like I'm rusty, but also like there's just a lot of unknowns right now. So it's a combo of like I'm trying to get my head wrapped around all of the different teams, but also like it's just it's a tough one. It's always tough week 1. One thing I started doing yesterday, Jake, is I was thinking, I feel like every year week 1 is really low scoring. Like it just like the scores get bigger throughout the season. So I went through and I added up the scores, just like on average, what did teams score throughout the week? And it's true, but both of the past, I just looked at the past 2 years. So last year in week 1, teams averaged just 18 points, which is the lowest of the season by far. Week 2, it got a little bit better. And like, you can see like generally it trends upward, scores get better. Same thing two years ago in the XFL, week 1, the teams averaged just 20 points week 2, 17.6, and then those are the 2 lowest on the season for. So just early in the season, I was thinking maybe we'll find some edge in the early in the season. Teams just don't score enough points, and we can take the unders. And then I look at the lines yesterday, and I was like, oh, the lines are all like 18, and like they're all like on the low end already. So I was kind of surprised to see that they did not, boost the lines for these teams like I kind of would have expected. Like you often see with, they set the lines high because people like betting overs. Does not seem like that's the case.
Yeah. Week 1, generally a very low scoring week. I think a big part of that is because these spring football camps are so short, only a 4-week training camp this year for all of these teams. So that is going to limit, some of the offensive concepts they can install and just overall their ability to score points. Really speaks to playing defenses in showdown, especially early in the season. We have 2 pretty solid showdown slates, for one for the Saturday game and then another, I believe, for the second game on Sunday. We can talk about that a little bit as we get into it. But first, Neil, I just wanted to mention, with these games starting on Friday night, we get depth charts 48 hours beforehand. That will mean, I would imagine, unless things come out earlier than they did last night or in the past, that after the slate locks, we will get Sunday depth charts. So how does that, for you, obviously very experienced DFS player, how does that sort of change your line of thinking? To me, that makes me want to load up a bit more on Sunday games. And it also makes me want to stay away from a situation where, say, I game stack a Friday game and I'm only leaving enough room for a guy who, could be inactive. That's a lineup construction I'd really want to stay away with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that those are generally good thoughts. Like that's something that we do all the time in NBA DFS, for example. Like you often get games start 2.5, 3 hours after the initial lock. So you often want to backload for value opening up there. I don't know if I'll do it to quite the same extent for UFL, just because we only have 4 games total. So it's I don't know. So it's harder to just not use the good plays, and it's gonna depend week to week. So often what I'll do is, if there is a player who's getting a lot of ownership, and I'm speaking to NBA here, and it's like sort of translatable, but not entirely, but like questionable value from early games, I like to avoid that. But like the stars, like Jacob Saylor is going to be on Friday night this week. I'll play Jacob Saylor. I'm not holding off there. But like if there are players who are looking like they're getting some ownership just because, oh, he's 3,000, he projects for 7 fantasy points, and like, we don't have anybody better, then maybe I'd hold off on playing a ton of that player, and hold off for potentially better value opening up once we get the depth charts. So yeah, I think it's more like I hold off on the more questionable value plays, but I do still play the better like pay up options in the early games, the studs.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was sort of thinking similarly myself. Really appreciate all the comments in chat, guys. I know Furby is excited for this slate. Furby, I saw you already got your 333 entries in, so I'm sure I'll see you in there. Daniels, he's said he's expecting a little bit of overlay due to the Friday night lock. Yeah, I'm trying to make everybody aware of the Friday night lock so they can get their lineups in on time. I'm going to tweet that out probably, plenty tonight, tomorrow, but definitely keep the Friday night lock in mind if you want to get your main slate lineups in. I believe it's 8 p.m. when the slate locks. Also, we might get good overlay on the Saturday showdown slate, and I would definitely expect some overlay on the Sunday 2-gamer. I am still cautiously optimistic we could fill main slate, but we will have to see.
I think it's worth making the point, Jake, that this is the rare time where we're not really cheering for overlay. Like we want these contests to continue week after week. So if you're thinking about it, about entering these, please do. We would like these to fill up so that they continue running these big contests. It's a rare thing that we're not cheering for overlay, but I think for UFL, just because they're really going to cut down the contest sizes if we don't fill them up. So if you're thinking about how much we want to play, go all in. Just go all in. Play all your lineups.
Yeah, no, this is, a big part of me. I'm going to enter about as much as I can afford. And a big part of it is, one, I'm trying to make money, but 2, I want to keep these contests big. So in a way, it's kind of a public service just to fire as much as possible for these lineups. All right, Neil, with all of that out of the way, I think we can finally get into these games now. First game, the season is kicking off with the St. Louis Battlehawks at the Houston Roughnecks. St. Louis is favored by 6 points. Total here is 37.5. In terms of injuries, there's really nothing of note, but we could get some rain here. So that's something to keep an eye on. Based on what I saw, it wasn't enough for me to want to adjust any projections. But, if that weather does get a little bit worse, I would be, I might adjust things downward, but I will keep everybody updated there. Neil, we can start with the St. Louis side. This is a tough team to assess. Manny Wilkins and Max Duggan are roughly expected to split snaps in some capacity. We aren't really sure what that will look like. Wilkins, obviously a big time rushing threat. We saw him start 2 games last year. Duggan is a bit more of a pocket passer. He can move better than McCarron, but you'd probably project him a bit closer to, what AJ McCarron was doing than Wilkins, who can really nuke these pass catchers because he only averaged about 150 passing yards per game and half a passing touchdown per game in his 2 starts last year. So we also saw St. Louis err a little bit more on the side of running the ball because, Wilkins is kind of a glorified running back playing quarterback. I don't necessarily think I can feel comfortable playing Wilkins, especially within a stack, but really even overall. I mean, he's 8,600. I have him projected for, I believe, about 60% of dropbacks right now. Neil, I'm curious where you're at on this quarterback situation. Would you consider playing a Wilkins Hakeem Butler lineup, a Wilkins Ja'Cory Pearson lineup? To me, these things are just a little too expensive, and there's a lot of uncertainty about this quarterback rotation.
Yeah, I would say so. So Max Duggan, we're clearly not playing this week just because he's so expensive, and like even if he played a full game, he would be probably priced appropriately. Like so, I don't think we're playing in Max Duggan. Wilkins is a little bit more questionable for me because he is like it's a strong offense. It's a pretty condensed offense where he has some really strong pass catching options. So I would certainly not double stack Wilkins just because I don't think he's going to have the throw volume for double stacking. But I think single stacking him with a Hakeem Butler, Ja'Cory Pearson, I think that is a reasonable approach. Not projected. We're projecting for 7%, sub 7% ownership. So at that level, I think that is fine. In a 150 set, I would imagine I'll get to some percentage in the single digits. I don't know if I'll even be overweight there, but I think it's a strong enough offense. He's cheap enough. You get a rushing quarterback with good enough weapons, and there's some chance that he just kind of runs with it, right? Like we're projecting somewhat of a split. Is this one that you were listening to a press conference like 15 minutes before the show started? I know you were.
No.
Okay.
So I was going to sit in on a Skip Holtz presser. That was listed as Central Time. I'm an Eastern Time guy. So that's actually going to be in the middle of our show. We may get a notification on who the Birmingham starting quarterback is in the middle of the show, which will be good information since I believe that's the last game of the slate that we'll be talking about. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm probably going to roll out, 50, 60 lineups in the main slate, $20. And I don't know, maybe 1 to 3 with Manny Wilkins and either Hakeem Butler or Ja'Cory Pearson makes sense. I think you could also trot out like a Frank Darby lineup. He was listed as a starter. I'm concerned he's going to be splitting reps pretty heavily. I only have him projected for right around a 50% route share right now. I still expect Denzel Mims, Gary Jennings to work in there. Blake Jackson will be behind Ja'Cory Pearson in the slot. So yeah, I think the big problem with St. Louis is just, these pass catchers are really expensive. And, if you stack them with Manny Wilkins, there's a chance Wilkins could get subbed out pretty quick. I mean, he is brutal as a passer. His interception rate wasn't great last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was a benching. But like Neil said, I mean, if he starts off hot, maybe throws a touchdown, runs one in the first half, the coaches might say, hey, Max, we're going to save you for next week. Manny Wilkins, you get to play the entire game. And, if I projected Manny Wilkins for the entire game, he'd probably be right around 19, 20 fantasy points because he does run so much. The scramble rate, the designed rush rate, both really high for Manny Wilkins. Another thing I wanted to acknowledge for St. Louis before we talk Jacob Sailors is that Bruce Gradkowski, their offensive coordinator from the 2023 XFL season and last year's season, he's now an offensive assistant with the Detroit Lions. So it'll be former wide receiver coach Phil McGeegan is coordinating the offense. I don't really expect a huge change to play calling. They didn't really make any notable personnel changes. This is still a team that's going to run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, is going to use Hakeem Butler as like a hybrid wide receiver tight end type role. But that is something to keep in mind and certainly something I'll be paying attention to on film if there's any, dramatic differences in the way this offense is structured. Neil, with that out of the way, let's talk Jacob Sailors. He's expensive. He's 9,300. I believe he's the most expensive running back on the slate, but it's for good reason. I mean, this is a player who I believe in my Bell Cow report, I ranked as the #1 fantasy running back in the UFL. He earned 15.5 weighted opportunities per game from week 4 until the end of the season. That would have been tied for the 3rd best workload in spring football history over a full year. He also finished the season as the league's 4th most efficient running back by weighted opportunity differential, and behind only Anthony McFarland in yards from scrimmage per touch. A little too excited to get that one out. But yeah, Neil, Sailor should be efficient, especially with Manny Wilkins at quarterback. I'd worry Wilkins could steal some inside the 5, inside the 10 carries, but rushing quarterbacks do dramatically increase the efficiency of their running backs because, obviously you have to play the quarterback on those read options where, when AJ McCarron was quarterback, you wouldn't really have to do that. So where are you at on Sailors? He feels like one of the handful of players who, has a pretty good guaranteed fantasy workload, but he's, fairly expensive.
Yeah, I mean, all UFL first team. He was awesome last year. Obviously, change of quarterback does make a big difference. They played some games together last year. We did not see, and this is I listened to the ETR show, and Alex from ETR had done some digging into what it looked like when they played together last year, and did not get targeted that much by Manny Wilkins. So that takes away some of the bite, but I'm not that concerned about it. I think Sailors is just he's the clear bell cow on this team. Like he was so good last year. At this point, we just know that Sailors is, or we think we know at least, that Sailors is the pretty clear bell cow, a team that's favored by 6 against, Houston, just kind of a mess of a team. So I think I still like it. And we're not projecting him for that much ownership, currently projected for 17% ownership. When there are fewer sure things, I think you just lean into the things that you are pretty sure about. And I think Sailors is one of those few players that we are pretty sure about. So I think I'll be overweight to 17% Jacob Sailors. I think he's worth the price tag. The volume should be there, and the skill is there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see as these depth charts come out. Tonight we should get Arlington and San Antonio, and then tomorrow, it'll probably be after lock, but there is a chance the depth charts open up a little bit more value and we see Jacob Sailor's ownership rise a bit throughout the week. It's really just, can you afford to play him or not? And yeah, definitely a good note that you acknowledged on Wilkins targeting running backs a little bit less. That's sort of a known thing across all levels of football. Rushing quarterbacks do not target running backs nearly as much as pocket passers do because they'd rather just take off and run rather than, try to throw the 5-yard dump off or whatever. All right, Jarvion Howard will be serving as the backup running back here. He's 4K. I think we're going to talk about it for this next team. There's a much better 4K running back option that I'd rather play. Would you have any interest on a dart throw on Howard in case maybe this is closer to a committee? We did see guys like Wayne Gallman and Mateo Durant work in a little bit last year, but I am expecting about 70% of the work here for Sailors.
Yeah, and I just answered it in chat, and now I'm sort of like hemming and hawing. I'm way too I tend to be too contrarian, I think, in UFL, and this is a spot where it's like, okay, my first instinct, which is probably the correct one, is no, we should not be playing any other running back on St. Louis. But to make the counterpoint, and a reason that I'm sort of second guessing myself is they could just dominate. Like they could be up by multiple touchdowns. He's only 4K. So at 4K, if you assume like he's going to get the fourth quarter work because they're up by a lot and they're still able to run all over Houston, I've probably played dumber plays. So I think in a 150 set, and I'm maxing out the mini max. There's a mini max for UFL, so I'm excited about that. I might throw a few dart throws in. I don't want to completely dismiss the other running back. I think if the game is close, like he's probably just not going to have opportunities if Sailors stays healthy and the game is close. But like in NFL, pretty regularly on shorter slates, I'll play some of the like more questionable backup running backs just from because there are multiple outs. There's Jacob Sailors gets hurt. There is the blowout scenario where they're just like up by a ton. Let's just give this guy the ball. We still want to run like constantly. So and if they're having a ton of success, like why not just keep running it? So yeah, I'm kind of talking myself into in a 150 set. Don't put a lot of money on it, but because he's min priced, I guess if you like the lineup the way it looks, he's like borderline playable.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. You heard it here first, guys. Neil Orfield has done dumber things in his own.
I've done a lot of dumb things.
I can believe it. When you submit a lot of lineups, there are going to be some dumb ones that end up popping up. Let's talk Houston here. Thankfully, we got news about who the starting quarterback would be for the Roughnecks. It's going to be Anthony Brown. He's only 6,900. Now, they did say there will be packages for Nolan Henderson. So I have Brown projected for about 90% of dropbacks, but he's sort of in the group with Kellen Mond, Luis Perez, Jordan Teamu, where we can be reasonably confident he's going to get a full game here. And that's really exciting given his price. The issue might be one of player skill, but Houston right now looks like a really easy team to stack. We really have a good idea of where this receiving volume is going. I actually sat in on a Roughnecks press conference. It was in early March 6th, 8th, right around there, where I asked Curtis Johnson, has any wide receiver stood out through this first week in camp? He said about 4 sentences, and he said Justin Hall's name 3 or 4 times. And also noted that early in the season in 2024, they struggled to get Justin Hall the ball at points, and that showed in his stats. I believe he was, right around 10th, 11th in fantasy points per game in the first 4 weeks of the season. Second half of the season, though, Justin Hall was a top 3 UFL wide receiver by fantasy points per game. We have him projected for, pushing a 30% target share. They're going to throw him a lot of design stuff, a lot of slants. They'll occasionally throw him a deep ball too. So, Justin Hall is going to be really, really involved. As wide receiver plays go, to me, he's like right there with Jontre Kirkland if you're paying up, as one of the best options on the board. Neil, what do you think about Anthony Brown, Justin Hall, and do any of these other Houston pass catchers stick out to you?
So first of all, Justin Hall, just a beast. We want to play some Justin Hall. He looks awesome. Definitely somebody. Sorry, you threw me off because I thought you were going to ask me about the quarterback, and then you asked me about the wide receivers instead. Do we want to talk about?
Game.
Okay.
Yeah,
whole passing game.
We can start with Anthony Brown. A little rusty.
So
it is our first show.
Yeah, not used to the ordering here. I just I'm used to doing my showdown breakdowns where I just go position by position. So I wasn't prepared. So So first of all, Anthony Brown, he is 6,900. So just really cheap. And that value is very tempting. Currently, we're projecting for just 19% ownership. I imagine that's going to come up a bit because he is so cheap. If it does come up too much, I just want to throw a little bit of caution out there that value, like there is a ton of replacement. What's the word I'm looking for? I had it and then I lost it. You don't want to. You only get to play one quarterback is what I'm trying to go for. I'm losing my words here, but you can only play one quarterback. So just because he's 6,900, if he puts up 9 fantasy points and there's another quarterback who puts up 25, you don't really care about that, $2,000 in savings. You want the fantasy points. So don't get sucked into playing him just because of the opportunity cost. Thank you, Daniels. Yes, that is the word that I totally lost it. Just as I was about to say it. There's opportunity cost there. So don't get sucked into playing him just because of the value. My guess is that he would be the cash game quarterback probably because he's 6,900. In cash games, sure. Yeah, you just want to play the best values. But in tournaments, I don't think you should play him just because of that value. If he did come in where we have him now at 19% ownership, sign me up. That would be awesome. I would take $6,900 starting quarterback all day there, especially in a game script where he should be forced to throw a good amount to try to keep up. So I do have interest, but if he ends up at 40% owned, then suddenly I'd be half the field at most, maybe less than half the field if he came in that high, 35, 40%. At that point, I would want to be half the field at most, just because there is a lot of opportunity cost there, particularly at quarterback where you can only play one. So just want to throw out a word of caution there. Pay attention to ownership before you play him. But if he comes in anywhere close to 19% owned, I would have a lot of interest there. And then obviously, in terms of pass catchers, Justin Hall, the primary pass catcher you want there. We've got him at 35% ownership. That is a bit much for me. I would guess I come in underweight to that on Justin Hall. I don't know. I do want to I think that I don't want to make the mistake of always being underweight to the guys who project really well. That was for me last year. It was a lot of weeks really frustrating for me how well the chalk did because it was, and then chalk, Jake, comes from you and it comes from Cody and it comes from you guys doing the projections. You do a really good job with the projections. That's where the chalk comes from. And the chalk did really well last year. The projections are very good. So I don't want to get away from it too much. 35% seems a bit much to me for Justin Hall, just given the price tag at 8,800. I think I'd want to be somewhat below the field there on Justin Hall, but he's an obviously very good play. Still somebody I'm going to have a lot of exposure to. Outside of Justin Hall, Kiki Chisholm, I do think is pretty interesting. Like he had his weeks last year where it kind of looked like he was emerging. Like suddenly he's looking like he's going to be a dude, and then he would just go back to being a pumpkin. I think at 6,100, Kiki Chisholm is someone that I have a good amount of interest in. I don't know if there's anybody else from Houston that really stands out to me. Did I miss anybody here? I'm just scrolling through our projections to make sure I'm not missing anybody. I thought there was one more on Houston that I was thinking about playing, but maybe not. Maybe it's just Justin Hall and Kiki Chisholm. Was there anybody else for you?
Yeah, so the only other guy that I really wanted to throw out there is Lawrence Keys, who was listed as a starter. I'm not super optimistic on, his ability to score fantasy points. I imagine he'll be splitting reps with Emmanuel Butler and TJ Vasher. Emmanuel Butler's just too expensive. TJ Vasher is like really bad. He got cut from last year's San Antonio Brahmas team. He was on the 2023 San Antonio Brahmas and averaged 0.57 yards per route run. That is pretty rough. So yeah, it's really just Justin Hall and Kiki Chisholm for me as pass catchers go here. I mean, Lawrence Keys is 3,000, so maybe you could, justify a dart throw on him, especially in a larger field tournament. I wouldn't hate it. The thing with Chisholm is that, he's a big-bodied, sort of prototypical outside wide receiver. They're going to throw him deep targets. They're going to throw him some targets in the red zone, and that's going to be about it. All of the designed first read stuff, for the most part, is going to go to Justin Hall. So I would just keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. But I think both are very viable stacking partners with Anthony Brown. And like I said, if you really want to scrape the bottom of the barrel, maybe you could throw a little Lawrence Keys in there. We have to talk the backfield, Neil. This backfield is really interesting to me. We have a pair of backs who are, popping as solid values in our projection. This is one of the only teams in the UFL with two backs that I think are tournament viable this week. First one we can talk about is the listed starter, Lorenzo Lingard. I really don't think him being listed as the starter over Kirk Merritt means anything. I think any between the tackles plotter for Houston would be listed as the starter over Merritt, who's like the third down, passing down, 2-minute drill back. So Lingard is really interesting. Imagine TJ Pledger last season, he averaged about 8 fantasy points per game. Imagine if he was 4,000. That's the real kicker with Lingard. Now, the problem with that is, sure, Lingard projects really well in terms of value. I think he's, excluding quarterbacks, our top fantasy point per dollar play on the slate, or right there as it. The problem, though, is that if Houston falls behind, and they are 6-point underdogs here, Lingard is going to be totally scripted out. It's going to be all Kirk Merritt. So I would keep that in mind. I really like Lingard with the Houston defense. I think that's probably my favorite way to play him. You can also use him as a one-off. I think that's totally fine. I mean, he provides great salary relief. And I mean, we have a $4,000 player projected for 9.1 fantasy points. That's really, really strong. And then Kirk Merritt is going to get, he's pretty much a lock for 4 to 6 targets in this game. He was, if you remove your qualifying filters, he was easily the most efficient running back in the UFL. He was almost double Anthony McFarland's yards from scrimmage per touch last year, which is absolutely insane. He was tremendously efficient by weighted opportunity per game, right behind Anthony McFarland there. He spent some time with the Dolphins, spent some time with the Saints. He could get some wide receiver reps as well, so they might line him up in the slot and throw him a screen. Really, really awesome role. Only issue is, Merritt's kind of mid-price, 6,600, so he's not popping as an elite value, but I do still think he's a very good play. He's a guy that you could play with Anthony Brown. I probably wouldn't want to play Lingard as much with Brown. I don't know if there's going to be as much correlation there, but you could certainly get away with it. Neil, I've rambled long enough. What are your thoughts on Merritt and Lingard here?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. Lingard, I like the call that better to play him with the defense. Like if the game is close, he's more likely to see more work. I think they're both like really, really strong plays. I will once again repeat opportunity cost with Lingard. Like just because he is 4,000 and a great value doesn't mean like jam him into all of your GPP lineups. However, like he is a great value. He's listed as the starter. So, and we're not projecting him to be crazy high owned, currently projected for, I just had it here, 24% ownership. My guess is I'll be underweight to 24%. But I think he's a fine play. He's somebody I'll probably have, I'll have him in the teens somewhere. Ownership would be my guess. Strong value there. And then Kirk Merritt, yeah, awesome play. only projected him for 16% ownership. If he comes in at 16% ownership, I would want a lot more of that for Kirk Merritt. Only 6,600. Should get a lot of passing game work. That passing game work, when scores are low, we've talked about this before. When scores are lower, any receptions are that much more valuable. Like just being involved in the passing game, super valuable when you don't really know what to expect and you're expecting low scoring. So I think Merritt, an awesome play this week. I'll certainly be pretty significantly over that 16%. Nadio says Merritt is a god. Merritt greater than Lingard. Agree with you on all fronts. Kirk Merritt was somebody that I believe he was pretty contrarian. That was somebody that I got excited about last year when he came back, and he was pretty contrarian. And I'm excited about him once again. I think they're going to be expect to be playing from behind. So yeah, give me the pass catching back who looked really good last year.
Yeah, my only other note with Merritt before we can move on from this game is that, look, in a neutral game script, I would fully expect Lingard to get the inside the 5, inside the 10 work. But if Houston falls behind by multiple scores, they will leave Kirk Merritt in to get inside the 5, inside the 10 carries. So I would keep that in mind too. Merritt has worse TD equity than Lingard for the most part, but if Houston falls behind, he's undersized, but they'll still keep him in because they need to move fast. So, definitely a chance Kirk Merritt could score a touchdown, even if he is mostly a sort of outside the 20s pass catching type of player. All right, let's move on to our Saturday game here. This has a fantastic showdown slate, 5K to first on the showdown for this one. There is no Friday night's showdown, which was an interesting decision by DraftKings, but still got 5K to first for this one. Neil actually won the only 5K to first showdown that we had last season in week 1, if I remember right, Neil. So, you might want to max this one. I'm not saying, but I am saying. All right, we have the San Antonio Brahmas at the Arlington Renegades. San Antonio favored by 3. Total here is 37. In terms of injuries, Jacob Harris is dealing with a rib injury. Matthew Sexton is dealing with a knee. Those are 2 wide receivers for San Antonio. They were both limited on Tuesday. I expect Sexton to be inactive regardless of his injury status, and for Harris to be able to go here. Neil, I think I forgot to ask you this on the last game, but do you have any bets that you like here, given the lines? I kind of like the over on 37. I'm a little hesitant to bet it in week 1, but I am curious what your thoughts are.
For the first game?
Either game. I like the over for the San Antonio Arlington game, but I forgot to ask you that on the last one.
Yeah. I like I said at the start, like, man, I was really inclined to come in here and just like say, take all the unders, but these lines are so low that it is tempting. Overs are more fun. So maybe I think these lines are pretty fair. I don't have a great take on the first game. I think the line seems about right to me. The second game, 37. I mean, San Antonio's defense is going to be so good this year that I'm not sure that I want to take the over there. Arlington, they've played together for a while, so it is one of the. I think they'll be one of the stronger offenses this season.
Yeah.
Just because Arlington has been together for so long. But man, it's a tough test for them. I also feel like Luis Perez, and I did not go back and double check this. I feel like he gets better throughout the year. Like he always starts a little bit slow. People forget about him. He's not somebody you consider, and then he puts up 4 touchdowns in a game or 3 touchdowns in a game, whatever. That's just kind of me. I didn't even check that. Just kind of thought of that just now. Like I feel like he's usually kind of a slow starter. I think my takeaway is just bet the Brahmas. Just take the Brahmas. Take the points there with the Brahmas.
All right, there you have it. I kind of like the over here. I'm not sure. I might get a little bit down on an offshore, but I'm not totally in love with it. All right, Neil, let's start with your San Antonio Brahmas here. Kellen Mond was named the starting quarterback. We fully expect him to take every single snap for San Antonio this week, which is a rarity in week 1, given the amount of quarterback splits I currently have projected. Mond, I think, is a really strong play. The upside case here, I think, is pretty straightforward. He could average, 12 to 14 passing fantasy points per game, which is pretty consistent in terms of what we've seen in an AJ Smith offense. And he could also put up around 8 rushing fantasy points per game, which was what we saw from Cole McDonald in his 2 starts in 2023. Chase Garbers last year also averaged 1 red zone carry per game, which would have ranked 4th best among quarterbacks who started a game last year before San Antonio dialed back his rushing after a week 3 injury. So definitely something to keep in mind. Kellen Mond is a capable passer. San Antonio has a lot of great passing concepts. AJ Smith is a good passing game coordinator, but he can also run. He's a big-bodied guy. I would not be shocked if they gave him inside the 5, inside the 10 carries. That will largely be designed as well. So definitely some exciting fantasy potential for Mond. I would have considered him the cash QB until we got the news on Anthony Brown being the starter for Houston. Brown just pops as a slightly better value, but Mond is shaping up as, right there as their second best quarterback value on the slate, Neil. Where are you at on Kellen Mond, and anyone among the San Antonio pass catchers standing out to you as a potential stacking partner?
First, I need to address Daniel says your San Antonio Brahmas. LOL, you here in Texas too, Neil. No, I actually decided that the Brahmas were my team because, as I'm getting into XFL, I needed to find a team. I decided on them because I liked Hines Ward. Like Hines Ward, the first year, that just like I loved his enthusiasm. Just like he seemed like he would be a fun coach to play for. So I was like, I like that guy. And then of course he got replaced the very following year by Wade Phillips. But now I'm a huge Wade Phillips fan. So it's all the same. Just kind of a random decision for me to be a Brahmas fan because I needed to choose a team, and there's nobody in the North at all, really. Like nobody close to Minnesota, at least. So I had to choose somebody. And I'm in Minnesota, Daniels, to answer that question. Kellen Mond, love it. Also, by the way, former Viking. He was drafted by the Vikings, right. As I mentioned to you. The Wade and Wes Phillips, the connection, the Vikings and the Brahmas. Love that connection. Also, those connections just keep on coming. I need to get myself a Kellen Mond Vikings jersey. If I can get one for $30 in XF in XL, I'm all in on Kellen Mond Vikings jersey. No, but this week, yes, I think he looks awesome. As you know, Jake. One of my favorite traditions is to listen to Wednesdays with Wade Phillips, a radio spot that happens every Wednesday. Wade Phillips quote on Kellen Mond as a runner. He said, when the throw isn't there, he can run it. And then you have designed run plays. He just adds another dimension there. Seemed like he, and I also, Kellen Mond had his own segment on that show this week, also talking about design runs. So it sounds like they are planning on, having some design runs. I didn't get the impression that they're planning on like a ton of them, but like they are planning on having some design runs for Kellen Mond. They're going to let him run when he needs to. And he's, in a pretty strong offense, some strong weapons in general. I think Kellen Mond is in a vacuum, maybe my favorite quarterback play on the slate. We are projecting him for 22% ownership. I think that's fine. I think that feels about right. Not a spot where I think I'm taking a huge stand on Kellen Mond. At 9,000, the price is right. This is projected to be one of the closer games that they're playing against a pretty strong opponent in the Renegades. One concern that we're going to have throughout the year potentially is just the defense being so good. Like that often does kind of hurt the offense. If the defense is too good, then the offense plays a little bit more conservatively. But I think the Renegades are good enough offense that maybe they can keep it close. Kellen Mond looks pretty awesome to me. I'm stacking him. I'm not just playing him by himself, even though he does have that running upside. Definitely have interest in Kellen Mond. Somebody I'll be probably pretty close to that 22% we're projecting the field at. And then as far as pass catchers that go, Jontre Kirkland is where it all starts with the Brahmas. Just a really talented receiver. He is 9,200, and we are projecting him for 32.5% ownership. So similar to Justin Hall, it's like, I think that's fine. You want to be eating a lot of the chalk because the chalk is generally pretty good. I think I'll probably be slightly underweight to 32.5%, playing with a new quarterback for the first time. Both these guys, like both him and Justin Hall, like that is never something that you love. Seeing the first game with a new quarterback and they're coming in as pretty chalky. So I'll probably come in a little bit underweight to that number, but not by a ton. Because again, I want to be eating a lot of the good chalk. You just want to play some of the talented guys. So I'll probably be slightly underweight to the 32.5% we have on Jontre Kirkland. So this is one of the quotes that from Kellen Mond. I don't know. I think I tended last year to read too much into the Wednesdays with Wade. Like he would say things. I'd be like, all right, I think I'm gonna, I had a lot of takeaways from it. And and a lot of the time they were red herrings. So gotta kind of take everything with a grain of salt. But if you want to read into this, is what Kellen Mond said when he was asked about. He said, I have great rapport with some of our receivers. Like he was just talking about how, yeah, we're really on the same page. Things are going well. And what he said. So when they asked him about who are some of the receivers that you are, really have a rapport with, he said about his receiver, Justin Smith has experience in this offense. First receiver he named, Justin Smith. Then he said John Trey has experience in this offense. And then we added Greg Ward. Jacob Harris is outside. And then a lot of these guys are rolling. So the four that he named were Justin Smith, John Trey Kirkland, Greg Ward, Jacob Harris. I just thought that was notable that he, first of all, did not mention Speedy Stevenson, Marquez Stevenson at all in those four, who I think both sites reasonably have him projected as the number 2 receiver there for San Antonio. But maybe it gives me a little bit of pause. I still think you can certainly play Marquez Stevenson at 7,200. We're actually not projecting for that much ownership. Looks like just around 6%. So at 6%, yeah, you can certainly. He was. I feel like last year I was chasing him most of the year, and like he never paid off. And then finally at the end of the year, when I kind of stopped, he started going off. So maybe you carry some of that momentum forward with Marquez Stevenson. I think at that ownership number, yeah, I'm into it. Justin Smith, by the way, was a leader of my model for most of the year. My routes run per yard model. Justin Smith was running wind sprints, but he was one that eventually did start having some bigger games toward the end of the year. Though those wind sprints finally turned into some production in fantasy, and he's again coming in at pretty low ownership. So yeah, 5,400. Justin Smith only projected for about 5% ownership. I will be overweight to that as well. And then Greg Ward. I don't know much about him. Currently, we haven't projected for 0 ownership. He's obviously not going to have 0 ownership, but at 6,600, not going to be somebody that I'm like super enthused about, but somebody I'll have some exposure to. Give me 5%, and I'd be happy with that. And then finally, I do think Jacob Harris to me is somebody that, and maybe I should be playing Greg Ward for some of the same reasons, because he was mentioned. Jacob Harris, though, kind of stood out to me that it was kind of like the way Kellen Mond said it, and this is me again putting on my conspiracy theorist hat, just like I'm reading the tea leaves here. The way he said it was like, and of course we have Jacob Harris. Like he didn't mention Alize Mack, the starting tight end, but they lost Cody Latimer. Cody Latimer retired. Cody Latimer was a pretty useful part of this offense, kind of a wide receiver tight end hybrid. I would not be surprised at all if Jacob Harris steps into that role. The fact that he kind of mentioned him as like, yeah, obviously we have Jacob there as well. To me, and along with, so it was that combined with Wade Phillips saying, mentioning like, oh, we're a lot more, we have more talent than we had last year. He seemed kind of excited about some of the additions they've made talent wise. He was probably talking about the defense because he's a really defensive minded guy, but like there's a part of me that's like, maybe he's excited about some of these new weapons that they have. Maybe that's what Jacob Harris is. Maybe that's what could be also Greg Ward. So just kind of putting the pieces together, players that are going to get like 0 ownership. Sign me up for some Jacob Harris. I think he's one of those players that I'm going to be taking a pretty, I don't want to say a heavy stand on, but like he's going to get like 0 ownership. I might have like 10% or something like that, which is kind of ridiculous compared to 0%, given his projections and stuff. But that's one where I'm going to kind of take the leap because it's week 1 with Jacob Harris, and maybe I should be with Greg Ward also, again mentioned as one of those guys. So I do have some interest there in my Brahmas receivers. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you did a great job covering it. Justin Smith, generally that deep threat there. I expect Speedy Stevenson and Greg Ward to sort of split time in the slot. Greg Ward, by the way, former college quarterback. That gives the Brahmas 2 players who played quarterback in college, and we know AJ Smith loves his double passes. So that'll be really fun. I mean, we're definitely going to see some Greg Ward to John Trey Kirkland or vice versa there. When it comes to Jacob Harris, unfortunately, this being a free show, I don't want to give the goods away too much. I have a great quote on Jacob Harris from one of the Brahmas coaches in our article over on fantasypoints.com and in the paywalled UFL DFS Discord channel. So definitely check that out. Very, very interesting stuff on Jacob Harris. But yeah, I'm a little interested in him. I don't know if I'm really going to get there much on the main slate, but for Showdown, certainly a bit of a tempting play. Not sure I really have much to add, though, on the wide receivers. I think you did a good job. Let's talk running backs. This backfield was last season's single most valuable fantasy backfield by weighted opportunity per game. Anthony McFarland and John Lovett are expected to split carries here. Now, for what it's worth, AJ Smith did have some very positive coach speak on who is it? Jashawn Corbin. I expect Corbin to be inactive. They carried 3 running backs into a couple games last year. We saw a few with McFarland, what was it, Morgan Ellison and John Lovett last year. So I think if Corbin was active, it would probably hurt Lovett more than it would McFarland. I think McFarland's pass game role is pretty locked in. But yeah, Neil, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this backfield. To me, the most tempting play is pretty easily McFarland, just because I view him as so explosive. But, a guy like Lovett could fall into the end zone 2 or 3 times and, obviously would represent a pretty good play. He is notably cheaper too. Lovett at 6,700, McFarland at 8,700. Where are you at on those 2 backs?
Yeah, I think Lovett was the one that I really fell for last year, where it was like he was so good. Anthony McFarland missed a handful of weeks, and Lovett just crushed from a fantasy standpoint last year. And then there was some quote that I was like, okay, I think he's still going to continue leaning on Lovett here. So I definitely have some interest in both of them, both Lovett and Anthony McFarland. McFarland at 8,700 projected for about 20% ownership. Lovett is getting a fair amount of ownership. I agree with you. The talent is there for John Lovett. I'll play some of both. I'm trying to decide if do I like the 20% on McFarland? I think I do. I think he's so talented that I think, and he's also a pass catching back. Which again, that with Kellen Mond, maybe that is not as big of a factor, unfortunately. But at 8,700 should get a fair amount of the work. He's an explosive player. I think I'll eat the 20% ownership on Anthony McFarland. John Lovett. So this is to your point on you think that Jashawn Corbin could be inactive. I would like it if he is inactive. If he's inactive, I think I could play John Lovett, because John Lovett, I think, would then be the goal line back. I think if Corbin is active, I would have real concerns that he's going to vulture those goal line carries, because Lovett doesn't really make sense to me as a goal line guy. Like, he's kind of a thinner guy. Like, I don't know, just watching him play, he does not look like a goal line back to me. He had some success at it last year. So maybe I just don't have a good eye for who's a good goal line back, but not like the prototypical goal line back. Whereas I watched a little bit of Jashawn Corbin. He looks more like a goal line back to me. Like, he looks like a guy who could just, be there to vulture when they need 2 yards or whatever. So if he's inactive, I'll have more interest in John Lovett. If he is active, maybe I'll be underweight to the field if he is active, just because I'll have concerns about Corbin taking those goal line carries.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think I'd probably stay away from Lovett if we see Corbin active. AJ Smith, for what it's worth, did describe Jashawn Corbin as a stud. So, there's certainly that. I think he has a lot of faith in Corbin, probably more faith than the team had in a guy like Morgan Ellison last year. So that's definitely something to keep note. If he's active, probably only McFarland for me. Neil, let's move on to the Arlington side of this game. This is a very easy offense to project, especially the passing game, because it's the exact same as last year, essentially. Luis Perez will be leading the way, and he's joined by Sal Cannella, Tyler Vaughns, Javonte Payton, Deontay Burnett, Isaiah Winstead. These are all guys who were on the team last year. This, if you're looking at these projections, these are going to look very similar to what we had last season. Neil, we know who Perez is. He's a pocket passer. He's going to drop back 30, 35 times, and he can throw, generally pretty well. And we have a pretty good idea of where those targets are going. Sal Cannella averaged 20 fantasy points per game from week 6 until the end of the season last year. I think he started that hot streak after I said he had never had a game over 17 fantasy points, and then it just went absolutely crazy. He also led the UFL in targets over that stretch. He was recognized in some of the reporting that I saw, and in some coach speak that I sat in on, as one of the camp standouts. That's not necessarily surprising there. I'm curious, obviously Cannella is a very obvious stacking partner. Right now, he has our highest projection among all the pass catchers in the UFL. I wouldn't be, maybe I'll dial that back by like half a point or so, but I have a hard time dialing it back much when, like I said, he averaged about 20 fantasy points per game in the second half of last year. Outside of Cannella, which of these pass catchers interest you the most?
And I'll start with just talking about Luis Perez, because it's easier for me to just talk about generally the quarterback interest. Luis Perez, he's 10,000 playing against, I think, the best defense in the league, or at least a top 2 defense. But I'm going to call him the best defense in the league, because they are my Brahmas. So it's a tough spot for Luis Perez, getting about 19% ownership. Seems about fair to me. I would imagine I'm going to be underweight to that because of the price tag, because as I mentioned, I think Luis Perez a little bit of a slow starter. On the other hand, like you said, they've played together for 3 years now. Like this is like the more continuity than we're used to in the UFL. So maybe the slow start narrative changes now that they have played together for longer. So I think 19% seems a bit much for me, just because of the price tag against a really tough defense, and zero running upside for Luis Perez, or next to zero running upside for Luis Perez, which can be nice for fantasy purposes. Just like knowing if I play this quarterback, you want to stack him, and you can double stack Luis Perez like that. There is something nice about knowing that if the quarterback gets there, you're going to get at least one, likely multiple receivers as well. But I probably come in slightly underweight on Luis Perez, given the matchup and the price tag. As far as who we're playing at wide receiver, so Sal Cannella, 30% projected ownership. That's too much for me. Again, I'm going to be underweight a little bit to the guys are getting a ton of ownership here. He's 8,400 against the best defense in the league. That's just a little bit tough for me, but continuity. I don't want to be super far under the field. I'll probably have 20%, somewhere around that range. Sal Cannella, certainly a fine play. Tyler Vaughn's at 7,600, also going to be underweight to the 28% we are projecting him at. I think he's a fine play. I'll have some. Tyler Vaughn's had some real nice spike weeks last year, but that is a fair amount of ownership there, a little bit more than I think I'm comfortable with given the matchup. JP Payton, 6,700. We're only projecting for 8% ownership. That seems fine. I'll probably eat that ownership, probably be around the field there. Deontay Burnett, man, all of last year, I kind of thought Deontay Burnett was going to turn it on. He was going to get back to the Roughnecks version, right? He was on the Roughnecks, right? When he had his really good year in the XFL, I thought he was going to get back to that. Never really got back to it last year. I think he may have had a spike week or two, but was certainly never consistent. At 6,000 though, 9% ownership feels about right. So I don't think I'm taking any major stands here on Arlington. Isaiah Winstead, a guy that he's like, felt like he had big play upside last year, but rarely paid it off at 4,400. Like maybe a dart throw in large field stuff, but nobody else that I'm really itching to play. How about you?
Yeah, to me, Winstead is a guy that I think I want to save for Showdown. The only other guy that I wanted to note, I think you did a good job covering it. I feel like part of Deontay Burnett's problem is that, he's competing with short area targets with Sal Cannella, and Cannella just seems to always win that battle. When he was playing with the Roughnecks, he was more of an outside wide receiver. In Arlington, he's pretty much exclusively in the slot, which was kind of an interesting change for him. I think my favorite for tournaments out of those, sort of four main guys would be Javonte Payton, also referred to as JP Payton, depending on the spreadsheet that you look at. Tons of big playability. 40% of his targets last year were 20 yards or more downfield. Also got a decent number of red zone targets. So it's really just, does he catch a deep shot or does he not? And, I think he's reasonably priced enough that I'm definitely willing to take some chances there. So something like a Luis Perez, Sal Cannella, Javonte Payton stack feels really nice because you get a lot of those guaranteed short area targets with Cannella, and then you might get some big play ability out of Javonte Payton. Neil, this backfield is interesting. The Renegades signed Davion Smith like 1 week ago, which was a little disappointing for me. I was really excited about Kalen Ballage. My thought at this point is that Davion Smith is going to be inactive and that Kalen Ballage and Day Hunter will be the only two running backs on the roster this week. I have about 80% confidence in that take. If Ballage and Davion Smith are both active, this is going to be very, very gross. They're fairly redundant players. They're both big bodied, 6'1", 230 pounds or so running backs. And Arlington loves to feed those guys. That's a role that's good for 12 to 15 carries plus another 2 or 3 targets per game. It's a really valuable role, especially if Arlington's moving the ball downfield. But again, if it's split between those players, I don't really think I can go there. That said, if Davion Smith isn't active and if it's Kalen Ballage, I think he's one of the best running back plays of the slate. He's really just a leveraged bet on Arlington's offensive success because a guy like Ballage is going to dominate touches inside the 5, inside the 10. They're always going to give him the first crack at it. And I also wanted to note Bob Stoops. He's been asked about camp standouts 2 different times. Both times, he's only named one skill player. It was Kalen Ballage. So I will leave it there. We have a bunch of other awesome coach quotes in our paywall Discord. Definitely check that out because there's more good stuff there. I don't think I can go with Day Hunter. If Day Hunter was 4,000, I would be pretty interested. Day Hunter is unfortunately priced at 6,000. He's looking at 3 or 4 targets, a handful of carries, probably nothing inside the red zone though. That's a tough bet to make at 6,000, especially given some of the other running back value that's on the board. Neil, anything to add there?
Yeah, sign me up for some Kalen Ballage. Like you mentioned it, like the coaches clearly love him. He's only 6,500. We're only projecting him for 16% ownership. So at 16% ownership, 6,500. If the coaches are excited about him, they might just load him up. I think even if Davion plays, I would play some Kalen Ballage. Like it would certainly throw a little water on the play, but I still think he would be playable just given the apparent enthusiasm from the coaches. Justin Freeman says Davion is dusted. He seemed dusted last year, and then he came through and had a couple like good fantasy games. But yeah, he has seemed pretty dusted and continues to. They've continued to give him the ball, but I think finally maybe it's just like they didn't trust Day. So maybe it was just a matter of like the personnel they had. They add Kalen Ballage. They're clearly excited about Ballage, so I think Ballage for me is going to be a pretty strong play regardless of Davion Smith's status. I don't think I'll play Davion Smith even if he is active. I think you're probably right that Day Hunter is not it at 6,000 or whatever. Like I think he's probably somebody that you're better off avoiding. But yeah, I think Kalen Ballage certainly signed me up for some of that. I also wanted to just note, just because I was going back through my notes, speaking of Perez. So the quote was, there will be some plays for Holton Allers as well to some degree. This quote from the coach. He doesn't run like Lindsey Scott, who's no longer with the team. He may not be as quick and elusive as Lindsey, but he's stronger and more powerful. There will be some of that throughout the year. So that is kind of interesting that, not a huge concern for Luis Perez, but like they will maybe use some of their backup quarterback as well.
Yeah, I think if anything, that probably hurts Ballage or Davion Smith, whichever one of the two is active the most. Last year, we saw Lindsey Scott, come in for some of those packages. He averaged about 1 pass attempt and 2 rush attempts per game, and a lot of that was in the red zone, especially Ehlers being a bigger-bodied quarterback. Lindsey Scott was pretty small. Ehlers is a much bigger guy. I could definitely see them running just like a QB power inside the 5, and that would hurt a guy like Ballage a little bit. I did give Ehlers a bit of a projection in our latest run today, but even for Showdown, I don't think you could go to Ehlers. It's really just something to keep in mind when you're building around Ballage, building around Perez. Ehlers might steal a touchdown. All right, so I think we have that game covered pretty well. Definitely get your Showdown entries in for that one. Like I said, 5K to first. We can move on to the Sunday games. Neil, this first one is going to be full of speculation, so this will be a fun one to talk about. It's the Michigan Panthers at the Memphis Showboats. Michigan favored by 5.5. Total here is 38. We have no injury report yet, so I will keep you guys updated in Discord as soon as something comes through. Neil, we can talk about the Michigan side of this game first. Here is the quote from Mike Nolan. Let me pull it up here. I dropped this in our Discord a week or so ago on where he was at on the quarterbacks. All right. There is a possibility we would rotate quarterbacks. If we were on the field today, we would be rotating. The 2 quarterbacks are very close. I'd be confident in either one, and that's why they might share time. They're both very capable. That was on March 21st. We're still waiting to hear what they're going to do with these quarterbacks, but I'm anticipating a split here. Now, for what it's worth, Bryce Perkins was easily the most efficient quarterback in the UFL last year as both a runner and a passer. He was very, very impressive. He looked good on film too. Danny Etling is the other guy. He's a bit more of a pocket passer type of player. This is kind of similar to what we're dealing with in terms of Manny Wilkins and Max Duggan in St. Louis. I consider Perkins a much better all-around quarterback than what Manny Wilkins is, but it's a little similar. Right now I have them projected for a split about 50-50 each, but Perkins is popping significantly more in projections because he's such a great runner. Last year, and this is one of my favorite stats that I pulled in my offseason writing, Bryce Perkins averaged 91 rushing yards per 4 quarters. That would be the single greatest mark by any player in modern spring football history. He's a very, very good runner. Neil, how do you play a split like that where we have an idea of who the better quarterback is for fantasy? I think that's very clear. But right now it's a 50-50 toss up. And the latest coach quote, like I said, from about a week ago, suggested this is just going to be a straight up split.
Yeah, I'm going to play some Bryce Perkins. I think it's one of those things where it's like, it's not worth the risk unless you're going to see major upside in the player, potential upside. I think Bryce Perkins has that kind of smash, similar to Adrian Martinez. We had this situation last year with Adrian Martinez. They were kind of going back and forth with the quarterbacks. They were projected to be a split because we were given no reason to believe otherwise. And this is a similar situation where it's like, we've been given no reason to believe otherwise, but maybe he just, starts the game, takes it, just runs with it. And if he does, you're going to get him at reduced ownership, and he's a player that can put up a huge fantasy score. So I'm not going to be playing any Danny Etling because I don't think he has that kind of major upside. But Bryce Perkins, I'll sign me up for some Bryce Perkins at projected single digit ownership, even at 9,300, just given that kind of upside, particularly on, in a week where we could have a lot of really low scoring games in general. One quarterback could very much separate. So I'll bet on the guys who have a chance at separating. I think Bryce Perkins qualifies as one of those players who could really separate here. So I like to play. I'll be loading up. Shouldn't say kind of depends where he ends up at ownership wise. Like currently we have him at 9% ownership, which I'm not going to be significantly above that. Like I think that is taking on a lot of risk. But I think if he ends up coming in more like 4%, I would want to be at least like triple that. At 9%, I think he seems like efficient. I think that's about the right number. How do you feel about it?
Yeah. I feel like, right in that like 7 to 10% range is pretty good. This is where a little bit of game theory comes in. We won't get this depth chart until Friday night, I believe after lock, most likely. So I would certainly keep that in mind. If Bryce Perkins is named the starter, there's a decent chance we don't know until after lock. I really, really hope he takes the first snap. I sincerely hope they do not give Danny Etling the first half and then Perkins the second half, because if Perkins gets the first snap, there's a good chance he could play well enough to get the entire game. So fingers crossed for that. I'll do a few Perkins lineups. The nice thing, if you are going to play Perkins and you are going to stack him, is there's really only two guys you have to worry about. It's Marcus Sims and Cioce Mariner, per our projections and, per pretty much everything I've seen. Looking back at last year, these two were quite good. Marcus Sims, more of a deep threat. He has great speed on the outside. Mariner averaged 14.7 fantasy points per game from week 6 until the end of the year. He was actually a midseason signing. During their playoff game, the broadcast acknowledged that I believe it was Mike Nolan who said, like, Mariner has meant so much to our team. Like, he was such an incredible addition, such a surprise. We love this guy. Obviously a great sign for him. And then Marcus Sims was the wide receiver 5 by fantasy points per game prior to a week 8 injury that sort of held him back in the final few games of the year. He's currently priced as the wide receiver 9. I think both of those players are pretty strong values, and I don't think either one. I mean, Mariner's popping a little bit in terms of ownership because he is pretty cheap. He's only 6,200. Yeah, he's at 35%. Oh, and Sims is at 27 too. So both of these guys should be pretty popular, but I really don't mind eating the chalk because, like I said, there's really only two guys we can have confidence in terms of these, Michigan pass catchers, and it's Sims and Mariner. Do you have anything to add there before we talk Colburn, McCrary, and Jaden Sheridan?
No, I think you know that both look like Great. Strong plays. 35%, a bit much, but it's fine.
Yeah,
I think both are pretty strong.
Mid-range for wide receivers a little tough, so that's what I think is going to push Mariner up. You scroll in that 5,500 to 7K range, Mariner really pops when you look at it like that. All right, let's talk backfield really quick. Matthew Colburn, Nate McCrary, and Jaden Sheridan will be splitting reps in some capacity. Now, last year, they pretty much only did 2 running backs active in a game. There were a couple games where it was Toa Taua, who was the third running back. He was active. That was only a special teams thing. I actually asked Mike Nolan, would you carry 3 running backs and play them all on offense? He said, probably not. It would just be a special teams thing if we do that. Now, that said, there's been great coach speak on Jaden Sheridan. Both Mike Nolan and the Panthers offensive coordinator, Marcel Belfuel, have said, look, Jaden Sheridan's been a great surprise. I believe Mike Nolan's exact quote was, the back from Monmouth isn't too shabby, which is such a funny 65-year-old man way of saying he's a good running back. I'm still not sure if he's done enough to be active. And I also worry a little bit, and I mentioned all this in my article and in the UFL Bell Cow Report, which is free to read, by the way, that, Sheridan's a little smaller, and Michigan's historic running back tendencies, at least with Marcel Belfuel as their offensive coordinator, looking back at last year, has been you give your red zone carries to the big body. Initially, that was Wes Hills, and then later in the season, that was Nate McCrary after Wes Hills went down. McCrary claimed, I believe it was 7 of 9 red zone touches. So, clear favorite in the red zone is the bigger bodied guy. That's, very clearly McCrary on this roster. McCrary's at 5,700. Colburn is at 7,700. Colburn will be the lead back, but kind of only in name only. This will be like a 60-40 split. And like I said in the Bell Cow Report, there were no instances of a Michigan running back last season earning more than 65% of backfield work in a game where both active running backs were healthy. So it seems like things are pretty capped in terms of total running back usage. All of that said, I think my favorite play here is McCrary because of his touchdown upside. I don't hate Colburn, though. Colburn's a pretty solid back. He's looking at probably 10 to 13, 14 touches. It's not terrible usage for a guy who's 7,700, but McCrary should get some carries, won't get as many receptions. And like I said, we'll get that very valuable inside the 5, inside the 10 work for the most part. Colburn will rotate in a little bit there, but I think it'll be majority McCrary. After that long rant, where are you at, Neil?
Yeah, we have some continuity here, which is nice with this running back room. McCrary seemed to pick up some steam. I was trying to pull up his game log right here, but as I recall, he picked up a little bit of steam as the season went along. He had some of his bigger weeks midway through, maybe later in the season. So yeah, I think I'm with you. McCrary to me is the better play, just given the price tag there. It's also like another situation where the game script should benefit them. Like I think teams generally are going to run a lot, but like they are favored by 5.5 points against a team that is dealing with a new coach here. So I think that it is a pretty good spot where they could just absolutely dust the opponent and just run it out in the third, fourth quarters. McCrary at 5,700, just given the price tag, I'm with you. Seems like a pretty strong play there. But yeah, Colburn only project for 12% ownership, 7,700. That feels totally fine to me. Not taking a huge stand there. I'll take an overweight approach to Nate McCrary, who is also projected for just around 5% ownership. So sign me up for McCrary over Colburn, but I think both are playable.
Yeah, I definitely like McCrary over Colburn, especially if that 5 to 7% ownership for McCrary ends up holding. I think that's a pretty interesting play there. I don't think I have anything else to add on the Michigan side. If Sheridan was active, I don't necessarily think that would change a ton in our projections. I'd probably take a carry or two away from each player and maybe some very slight pass game work. But yeah, I would still expect Colburn and McCrary to lead the backfield. Oh, Neil, we did not touch on bets for this game. I did throw out a Michigan -3 as soon as we got the news that Memphis head coach Ken Wisenhunt was stepping away for personal reasons. I believe I put that in our UFL general chat on Monday. The line's gotten out to 5.5. I'm not sure I like Michigan as much at 5.5, but man, I mean, this Memphis team could definitely be a disaster. I do expect the defense to improve. They hired the old Pittsburgh Maulers defensive coordinator. 2023 Pittsburgh Maulers had one of the best defenses in spring football history. So I'm optimistic the defense could improve here. But, Ken Wisenhunt was the head coach. He was the offensive coordinator, and he left 5 days before their first game. Like, that doesn't necessarily speak to the offense functioning well as we head toward kickoff here. Neil, do you have any thoughts on the betting lines before we talk about the Memphis side, which is a total toss-up? This is going to be a very interesting discussion on the Showboats.
I mean, I think you nailed it with taking them when it was the line was 3. Taking the line there made sense. Now that it's up to 5.5, it's probably efficient. So yeah, I don't think I have any takes there.
Yep, fair enough. Another thing that I wanted to acknowledge with Michigan is I think their defense is going to be really, really good. I did penalize some of these Memphis players a little bit in efficiency. I also did that with the players facing Birmingham and the players facing San Antonio. Those are kind of the only 3 defenses I feel convinced will be above average this year. Michigan returning 10 of 11 defensive starters, including Defensive Player of the Year, Breland Speaks. And Neil, I don't know about you, but when Breland speaks, I listen. I don't know if Memphis will be listening. They are looking at a quarterback rotation, most likely, between EJ Perry and Troy Williams. My thought here is that Perry is the favorite to start, and I have him projected for about 60% of dropbacks. I actually attended a press conference with the new head coach, Jim Turner, who is the offensive line coach and, now the interim head coach. He noted, I forget the exact quote, but he sort of said something in a capacity that made me think, oh, maybe EJ Perry's going to be the starter. EJ Perry comes on next. He says he has no idea. For what it's worth, Memphis has been promoting EJ Perry in their more recent media posts a bit more than Troy Williams. So I think it's more likely than not that EJ Perry starts. I don't really know how they're going to handle the rotation. And even if they come into the game thinking, oh, EJ Perry is going to get 100% of reps, whenever there is a close quarterback battle like this in the UFL, a guy throws one pick and all of a sudden the backup's in there, right? So should be a short lease for EJ Perry. We also don't have this offense projected as being particularly efficient, which is holding back these quarterback projections as well. Bryce Perkins is projected to be in the split. He's at 12.5 fantasy points for us. EJ Perry's at 7.8, also in a split, because again, I'm not anticipating great efficiency here. Can I interest you in either quarterback, Neil? Do you have any love for EJ Perry, any love for Troy Williams?
I don't think so. I think this is of all the spots where it's a split quarterback, I think this is the one that is the most likely to remain a split, just based on the coach speak with Jim Turner. Even if he's taken over, he's referencing Ken Weisenhut as Weisenhut always he views the UFL, and it's kind of interesting. I think all coaches probably view what their job is a little bit differently, but Weisenhut, and I think he instilled it in the coaches taking over, his view of the what his role is give everybody a shot to showcase what they have to try to make it to the NFL. He very much viewed it as, this is an NFL breeding ground. We got to give everybody a shot. So I think it's more likely here than elsewhere that they're just going to use both quarterbacks, give them both a chance to show what they have, potentially get on an NFL roster. And even if one of them does play the whole game, it's just going to be a shit show here. They're just new coach, everything just kind of a mess. Not the best team anyway. So, I don't think I have much interest here.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Jim Turner did say we're not changing any of the play calling. We're not changing the terminology. This is still Whisenhunt's offense. Him and the wide receiver coach, I believe it's TJ Verneri, they're going to both collaborate in play calling. The exact quote from Turner in that press conference regarding playing time was, I want to get every guy on the field. We are going to attempt to play every player. And then, I inferred a little bit who is active on game day. So that is, that is really, really tough. I have very split projections for the wide receiver position. I have very split projections for the backfield here. This is difficult. So the one thing that I will say is I looked a good bit into Ken Whisenhunt's historical play calling tendencies in terms of, running back wide receiver usage. Some of Scott Barrett's old articles from when he was at PFF were actually a huge help with this. Scott used to write like a maniac. He was writing 4 articles a week for the 4 or 5 years he was at PFF. So there's a great Scott Barrett catalog if you ever need to research coaching tendencies from 5 years ago. But the big problem with Whisenhunt, at least when it came to running backs, was that he never really wanted a true bell cow. Austin Eckler was the most efficient running back in the NFL in 2019. He still gave Melvin Gordon more work. And he said time and time again, we just don't want to give any of our running backs too many carries. We want to spread it out. I don't really think there's a ton of bell cow upside here, as much as, NFL fans may be excited to play a guy like Deneric Prince. I don't really know that I can get there. Honestly, I think, based on these coach quotes, I'd probably be a little bit more interested in whoever the backup is, assuming they only carry 2 active into game day. Both of the backups, Jalen Jackson and who's the other one? Jacob Caboti. They're only 4,000. So if this is, a committee between one of those two and Deneric Prince, who I fully expect to be active on game day, everything sort of suggests, he should be one of the top 2 running backs. I think I'd rather take a shot on one of those 2 guys. Do you have any thoughts there?
I think that makes sense. Just if they're going to have a committee, give it to the guy who's coming in at min price. I think that would be only if the other one is inactive. So if Jalen Jackson is inactive, then I would have interest in Caboti. If all 3 are active, then it'd be tough to play Caboti or Jalen Jackson. But yeah, if one of those guys is inactive, suddenly the other one would look pretty good to me. And Deneric Prince, 7,500, we're projecting for 12%. I think I'd be probably underweight there. He is a former NFL running back, which I think I also historically that's a mistake I've made with spring football is I give too much credit to the former NFL guys. Like the names I recognize from the NFL are guys that I'm like, well, he's NFL talent, and then it just doesn't really work out that way. Like a lot of the guys come from the NFL. You expect them to be really good in spring football, and they're just not. So I don't want to give too much weight to Deneric Prince coming from the NFL, potentially being the lead back here. He is expensive enough that I don't know. 12% seems fine, but not something I'm excited about.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Shout out to Trey in the comments, more like generic Prince in this situation. Bruce Hines also with an interesting note.
Yeah.
Cabote, a former Jim Turner recruit. So I'd probably, knowing that, I think that's a really interesting note. Cabote's probably slightly more likely to be active. I actually did in our projections yesterday. I had Cabote getting all of the backup work. I decided to split that between him and Jalen Jackson, just because if you're making lineups before lock on Friday, we won't have that information. So I don't want to take a total guess on who's going to be active and, force a guy like Cabote into your lineups if he's not even going to play. So definitely keep that in mind. Yeah, I think I'm probably just going to take a couple shots on whoever the RB2 is. If all three are active, I'm largely staying away. Maybe I'll have a little bit of Deneric Prince, but man, it's tough. Wide receiver is also tough. The good news is Ken Wisenhunt offenses did tend to be pretty concentrated around one guy. That was Keenan Allen back in the day. They also had a clearly defined sort of outside wide receiver 2 role in Mike Williams. So that sort of begs the question, Neil, who's the Keenan Allen? Who's the Mike Williams here? Mike Williams, I think, is a bit of an easier guess. Jonathan Adams, who's been a spring football veteran, played for the New Orleans Breakers back in the day, played for the Showboats last year. He's probably the best bet to be that Mike Williams type player. I could also see it being Kai Loxley, D. Anderson, or Isaiah Washington, all of whom are, bigger bodied outside type wide receivers. There was a clip that Memphis tweeted about a week ago of what looked like Loxley, getting what I thought were first team reps with EJ Perry, Deneric Prince, Jonathan Adams out there. I don't really think you can put a ton of stock into that, but I did think it was worth noting. Yeah, Neil, when it comes to those outside wide receivers, do you have any preference? I mean, Adams kind of feels like the only one you could trust. Loxley is fairly cheap. I might have a little bit of both, but I really don't love it.
I think Adams was another guy who really popped in my model last year, just running wind sprints. And I kept on playing him. And then I think I finally, when I stopped playing him, he had a big game. But so that was just a theme last year. I gave up on guys and suddenly they were very good. And I think this year it's even tougher to play him. I think like if you're going to play one of these guys, like eat the value to some extent, because I do think like they're probably going to be running some kind of a rotation here. So yeah, sure. Kai Loxley, if you want to take a shot on Kai Loxley at 3,700, hope that he scores a touchdown or has 4 receptions in his limited playing time. Sure, that's a totally fine dart throw, but I think they're all just dart throws. Like even Jonathan Adams, I don't trust. I think they're all. It's just a mess of an offense. Now I was kind of toying with the thought of like, so what they're saying is we're going to run the offense that Ken Wisenhunt ran, but we're going to simplify it, which kind of made me think like, does that mean they're going to run a lot of the same play over and over? So like if they condense the plays that they call, does that mean that they'll condense on one player? So I kind of wanted to like think about, okay, could it potentially lead to some guy getting 8 targets just because they like only have a handful of plays to run? But I still think that was enough, not enough to really sway me into being excited about these guys. But sure, yeah, Kai Loxley, why not? 3,700, cheap enough. I'll take some shots there.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair. Oh, another thought that I had was initially when I saw the offensive line coach got promoted head coach, I was like, man, maybe I should bump Memphis's rush rate up because offensive line coaches love to run the ball.
Yeah.
They hate throwing. I mean, they just want to body guys. The offensive line coach said he will not be changing their pass run tendencies. He said they want to remain as balanced as possible. So I have them right around that sort of median 59, 60% pass rate is about what I'm expecting. That's sort of what Ken Wisenhunt's historical tendencies would suggest, and that's sort of what league-wide averages would also suggest. So just keep that in mind. Don't jam in these running backs just because it's the offensive line coach. Yeah, Yankee in the chat. Lingard is, I would say, definitely the better play than whoever the backup Memphis running back is. It's tough in these 4K running back streets, but I think Lingard is my favorite. Neil, when it comes to the Keenan Allen, I think that's maybe a little bit of a better bet in this offense. I think it's either going to be Kwame Lassiter or Isaiah Henney. Isaiah Henney led the 2023 USFL in target share at 25%. He did nothing with Houston last year, but he was hurt a little bit, and Houston's coaching staff is kind of incompetent, so I don't really blame him for that. Kwame Lassiter was spotted with the first team in the slot, which is a good sign, but not, nothing crazy. Would you have any preferences there? I think I'm fine with either as a dart throw, but I really don't want much exposure.
Yeah, and they're both coming in at like the same within $100. Lassiter's 4,800, Henny 4,700. I have no read on this situation. It's just one of those that I'm probably not going to play a ton of it. Maybe I'll have a couple shares of each, but not going to be any kind of volume there for me.
Yeah, Eli Stove could work into the slot as well. I expect Eli Stove to be inactive out of the three. But if it was just like Henny and Stove, Stove is 3,000, so I might take a shot there. He's just been like a permanent wide receiver 4, 5, 6 in spring football, so hard to have much excitement there. I'd be a lot more excited about a guy like Henny. I thought I spotted Chris Pierce, who is a tight end, getting first team reps. That could have just as easily been JJ Wilson or Ryan Izzo. Ken Wisenhunt historically did use tight ends a decent bit. Hunter Henry back in 2018, 2019 was a pretty competent fantasy asset. I'm not sure how much of that we're going to see, but I'm fine taking shots on either Pierce or Wilson, who I expect to be the most competent receivers in that tight end room. I believe they're both minimum price. Maybe JJ Wilson has a little. Yeah, JJ Wilson is 3,100, and who's the other guy? Chris Pierce is 3,000. So either of those guys are fine. But again, Memphis is a total guessing game. We're dealing with a totally new staff, a lot of roster turnover. So if you wanted to avoid Memphis entirely, I wouldn't hate it. If you wanted to take some stands on some of these guys who you may or may not think are really good, also fine. I mean, this is just one of those spring football spots where we don't have beat reporters. We don't have preseason. It's largely a guess. I'm doing my best with the information I have, but there's only so much you can do with a football team you've never seen before. All right, Neil, I think we're good to move on to the last game here. This game has a 2K to first showdown slate, which is pretty great. That is the Birmingham Stallions at the DC Defenders. Birmingham is favored by 7 as the defending champions of the UFL. Total here is easily the highest on the slate at 41. We don't have any injuries to note here. Neil, any thoughts on this betting line with Birmingham favored by 7 here and the total at easily the highest on the slate?
Yeah, Christopher says he thinks DC to cover. I don't know. They lost not only their starting their head coach, they also lost their defensive coordinator, Greg Williams, like one of the bigger names. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to note that with both of the coordinators, they're both expected to follow Reggie Barlow to Tennessee State. They're going to finish the season though.
Oh, really? He's playing.
Yeah, that was something Barlow noted. So they're gone as soon as the season ends, but they will be there to coach the rest of the season. Barlow's out. They have an interim head coach. That's Shannon Harris. Fred Keiss, Greg Williams will remain for the rest of the year.
Okay, I read whatever I read was wrong then, or I just misread it apparently. Okay, that is a good note. So I thought they were losing their defensive coordinator 5 days before the season started too. That is good to know that he is going to be around this year. In that case, 41 is the total. I don't know. The spread is 7. That does feel like a bit of a big spread considering DC is returning Jordan Teamu. Yeah, sure. Take DC to cover. I think that's a fine bet to make, but I don't feel particularly strongly about it. Do you?
Yeah, I don't really feel good betting against the Stallions. This line seems about right to me, and both of these are two teams that should be some of the more competent offenses, so the total also feels about right. We can get into the plays here. Start with the Birmingham side. Oh, did want to acknowledge Christopher's comment. Lingard being listed as the RB1, I don't think mattered much. We talked about that earlier if you just rewind in the show. So definitely check out our St. Louis and Houston segment if you're interested on our thoughts on Lingard. Birmingham side. Here, I will read off the latest quote from Skip Holtz. He was scheduled to do a presser today, so we might get something new here shortly. But this was the latest quote from Skip Holtz on the quarterback room. This is from March 13th. Matt and Alex are getting the bulk of the reps. You chart every throw, every completion. Right now, you've got two very talented QBs. It will all come down to who gives us the best chance to win. Both of them have the talent to do that. He sort of inferred or suggested that he, isn't opposed to doing a 2 QB split like what we saw with Adrian Martinez and Matt Corral last year. Hopefully we get some news on who is at least going to take the first snap. I expect that to be Alex Magoo. I also expect Magoo to be more efficient. Neil, easily the craziest stat that I found in my offseason research I think this is great. Top 5 fantasy seasons by a quarterback in professional football history. Number 1, 2019 Lamar Jackson. Number 2, 2018 Patrick Mahomes. Number 3, 2024 Adrian Martinez. Number 4, 2013 Peyton Manning. Number 5, 2023 Alex Magoo. So 2 of the top 5 greatest fantasy seasons by a quarterback in pro football history have been Birmingham Stallions quarterbacks. One of them is still on this roster. Magoo is projected, like I said, notably more efficient for Corral, but we have about an even split. Neil, assuming we go into Friday night, assuming it'll be something close to a split or anticipating it could be a split, how do you want to play that?
So you mean if we just don't know the situation, like we don't get any better quotes?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm sort of pricing in a split right now. Obviously, it could be maybe an 80-20 Magoo or even 100% Magoo. I would be really shocked if it was 100% Corral. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, obviously, unless Corral is the starter, then we have to consider that it could be 100% Corral. I think that we can play Magoo. So I know we had the situation last year with Adrian Martinez where they were splitting the quarterbacks, and the quarterbacks went to Skip Holtz and said, we don't like this. We don't like going back and forth in the games. We can't really get any kind of a rhythm. So they told him, like, we're not a fan of this. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is a quarterback split, but I also I think that there is some reason to think that maybe we do just get a full Magoo game, and maybe they go back and forth to the quarterbacks. I don't know, but we just given that they tried that last year and the quarterbacks specifically told the coach, we don't like this. We don't like being jerked around, in and out of the game. Just give us a full game or don't play us. So I think could be the same situation this year. Maybe they'll go in with that new perspective based on what happened last year and what worked for them really well last year. Once Adrian Martinez took over and, did get kind of going, he just absolutely crushed for a while. I think Magoo, if he, assuming that he is named the starter, I think Magoo is certainly playable at 8,500, just given his rushing upside. I know I didn't really watch the USFL that much, but I know he was awesome as a runner and as a fantasy player. So I think that he is, in that same bucket as Bryce Perkins, where it's it might be a split, but also he has omega upside if he gets the full game, and he's going to get reduced ownership because of the split. Probably. I know ETR is projecting him to be the starter, so maybe we don't get quite that much reduced ownership, but I'm willing to take my shots on Magoo and just make the assumption that he is going to play the whole game, or like you said, or at least 80% of the game. That could be enough given his rushing upside. I think Magoo is a strong play. I don't think I'll play any Corral just because I don't think at 9,500 he's also more expensive, and I don't think he has quite the same omega upside. So I think Corral you can kind of pass on, and Magoo I think is a fairly strong play just given his upside. How about you?
Yeah, to me, Magoo, as things stand right now, is basically the same play as Bryce Perkins, a high upside, could play the full game type of, split quarterback. I've been keeping an eye out to see if there's been anything from the press conference. I think I have the replay somewhere, so I'll watch that after the show and let everybody know in Discord. Note OM, you said you have a fresh Skip Holtz quote. I scrolled up. I did not see it. Could you repost that in chat if it is brand new? Please let me know. Very curious if there are any fresh Skip quotes. When it comes to the running back room, we can talk about that real quick here. It's the same as last year. It's CJ Maribel, Ricky Person, and Larry Roundtree. We fully expect Larry Roundtree to be inactive, which will make it a two-headed backfield between Maribel and my boy Ricky Person. You see, the problem with these two backs is they just cap each other's upside, which is pretty tough. This is pretty close to an even split. I think the NFL comp here is a very easy one to make. It's a lot like last year's Detroit Lions backfield between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Now, the difference is Maribel gets a little bit more work inside the 5, and he gets a little bit more passing work. Person seems to make up the difference with just more raw efficiency. He's a better runner, especially in between the tackles. I really like, I don't really like. I'm okay with both players. I think I'd give a slight preference to Maribel, but they effectively project the same. I don't know that I really have much to add. I think they're both okay running back plays. I want a little bit exposure to both. But like I said, the upside is largely capped here because it's pretty much an even 50-50 split in terms of weighted opportunity. Last year in their fully healthy games together, it was, I believe, 50.1% Maribel, 49.9% Person, which certainly makes it tough. Neil, anything to add on this backfield before we talk pass catchers?
I think they're both playable. I mean, this is your favorite player, your favorite player in the UFL, Ricky Person here. They could just have big volume here just because DC is going to be, dealing with a new coach thing. It's a 7-point spread here. So they could just be playing from ahead and just run it a lot. They also have, again, rushing quarterback could lead to better efficiency. So I think both are strong-ish plays at Ricky Person 6,800, CJ Maribel 7,100. Neither of them getting ownership out of hand. I think the ownership that they are getting is essentially appropriate, like mid-teens kind of ownership on Maribel and Person. I think both seem like strong plays at that level of ownership.
Gotcha. Okay, I did just find a tweet from State of the Stallions, which is sort of the main Birmingham fan account. He said, according to Coach Holtz, he has not decided on a starting quarterback yet. It will either be Alex Magoo or Matt Corral. Holtz will make that decision tomorrow. Case Cookus will be quarterback 3. That's expected. But Holtz said in a couple more weeks, he could be competing with Alex Magoo and Matt Corral as the starting quarterback. So that could really muddy things. I really don't think Cookus is good enough to unseat Magoo or even Corral. Certainly something to keep an eye on. Hopefully we get an announcement on that beforehand. I will rewatch that press conference and drop any notable quotes in our Discord. Neil, the pass catchers here are, it's really tough, I have to say. We're projecting, last year in the first half of the season, we saw Birmingham effectively do platoon swaps at wide receiver. So they'd have, 3 starters and then they'd have 3 backups. They'd swap them all out at once. And all those players were running roughly 50% of routes, which made things really tough. They sort of have a designated alpha wide receiver on the outside. That was largely Deion Kane and Benjamin Victor last season. And then they have like a deep threat guy that was mostly Gary Jennings last year. And then they have slot guys, Marlon Williams and Amari Rogers, both of whom returned this season. This is really tough. Like I said, I think the only guy we can bank on for more than 60% of routes right now is Jay Sternberger, the tight end. And, Sternberger's a solid tight end. Imagine, Sal Cannella light is sort of how I would describe a guy like Sternberger. I think Sternberger's biggest problem is that when they get inside the 5, inside the 10, there's a good chance they could go to Jordan Thomas instead of Sternberger. They threw a ton of jump balls, a ton of conversion attempts to Jordan Thomas last season. So they do like him a little bit more as a red zone threat. Otherwise, Jordan Thomas barely plays. At wide receiver, we can have a little bit of confidence in Deion Kane, but otherwise it is like a very, very gross split here. At least that's what I have projected right now. What I'm the most interested to see is, will Birmingham only carry 2 slot receivers into this game? In 2023, Davion Davis ran 99% of his routes from the slot. I believe he finished second in the USFL in receiving yards that year behind only Corey Coleman. He's back. So are Marlon Williams and Amari Rogers, who were exclusive slot players last year. I would be really shocked if they carried all 3 into game day. I sort of tentatively expect Amari Rogers to be inactive. We still have given him a bit of a projection. I think my favorite play, assuming we get like Amari Rogers or Marlon Williams inactive, I think my favorite play of these wide receivers, excluding Kane, excluding Sternberger, would be Davion Davis. Only 4,100. And again, he has that rapport with Magoo. They balled out in 2023 in the USFL, and he is a very competent slot. The slot role is fairly valuable for fantasy. They get some inside the 10 targets. They scored some touchdowns last year. So I would keep that in mind. Neil, I feel like I've talked long enough about this. Do you have anything to add on these wide receivers where it's a little similar to Memphis? It's a big toss up. I wouldn't be shocked if everyone who is active ran 50% of the routes.
Yeah, and I love the call of Davion Davis just because he is, again, like, if they are going to be doing hockey changes, just take the value because it's going to be hard to pay off an $8,500 price tag or whatever, but like at 4,100, you can pay that off even in limited time. So yeah, Davion Davis looks pretty good to me. Jay Sternberger, like you said, just we have some continuity there with Sternberger. He was pretty good last year. 6,400, a new quarterback, so like not continuity in that sense, but like continuity with the team, knowing the playbook, all of that. So Jay Sternberger rank at 6,400 is playable. Deion Kane, like, I want to be enthusiastic about it. I'll probably play some Deion Kane because like he has shown pretty big upside, but 8,100 and probably not quite a full-time player is a little bit rough, but I think playable in large field GPPs.
Yeah. The only other thing that I wanted to acknowledge, and this is a great note from Note OM, is that in the 2022 USFL season, Marlon Williams actually did play outside. That would make the projections pretty tricky if we get all of Marlon Williams, Davion Davis, and Amari Rodgers active. I would probably give Marlon Williams more of the outside role there. He's the most flexible in terms of his ability to play outside or inside. He's also been in the offense the longest, so I'd expect he would understand the other wide receiver positions a little bit better. Yeah, it's a tricky projection. I'm kind of fingers crossed that one of these slots will be inactive so that, that'll make things a little bit easier. But again, this is a Sunday game, so we probably won't have that information when the slate locks. I'm fine taking a few shots on Davion Davis, but I don't want to get carried away because he could be inactive. That's also possible. Yeah. So definitely leave yourself room to pivot there if you are going to play a guy like Davion, because there is a little bit of risk.
Jake, what do you think of Furby asked, can you just play Alex Magoo naked? What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think so. So the thing with Magoo, probably more than any quarterback in the UFL, is that he's very, very willing to keep it on a rate option inside the 5 or inside the 10. I had a stat on it, but I believe in the 2023 USFL, he among quarterbacks, he basically doubled up the next closest quarterback in terms of inside the 10 carries. I believe he had 11 over the regular season, so that's about 1.1 per game. That's pretty nice. He could definitely run it in a couple times. And because things are so spread out among the wide receivers, I think that's another good reason to potentially just play Magoo naked, hope he gets the full game and scores 30 fantasy points. And then you can find your pass catching fantasy points elsewhere. Do you have anything to add on that or these wide receivers?
No, I think you covered it.
All right. Well, guys, we just talked for an hour and a half about 4 UFL games.
Wait, we haven't done DC. Have we done DC?
Oh my gosh, I do this every year, man. I always try to skip a team. We have not done DC. Okay. We already talked about it. Reggie Barlow is out, but for all intents and purposes, the play calling should remain the same this year. So we really aren't treating this team any different than we were in 2024. Jordan Teamu will be the starter, and we have pretty good amount of confidence he's going to get every single snap. So that on its own makes him one of the more valuable fantasy options in the UFL. Neil, any thoughts on Teamu? He has sort of a middling-ish projection, at least among the starting quarterbacks. Where are you at on him?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Teamu was a guy that I used to like to play a lot. Yeah. And I do kind of when he comes in at low ownership. He's going to come, like, we're projecting him for mid-teens ownership. That seems fine. Like he has upside. He had some big games last year. 9,800, should be having to throw the ball to keep up with Birmingham. It's also a tough matchup with Birmingham.
Yeah.
I don't know. I will be underweight to Teamu would be my guess, just because there are other guys that I'd rather take shots on, Mond and Magoo and Bryce Perkins. So I think I'll be a little bit underweight there, but hard to call him a bad play. I think he's a totally fine play.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. More just fine. Not someone I'm itching to get into my lineups, but certainly a guy you want a little bit of exposure to, especially in a game where he will be forced to throw. Last year, this DC offense was quite inefficient. especially running the ball. That was partially because star running back Abram Smith tore his ACL in training camp last year. He's back this year. I also expect this offensive line will be a little bit improved. They were pretty good in 2023. They were pretty bad in 2024. I'm sort of playing the middle there in terms of how I'm projecting their rushing efficiency and sack rates and stuff right now. I expect them to be about average. I do think this backfield discussion is interesting. Abram Smith is a guy who's now 12 months removed from his ACL tear. He set the modern spring football rushing record back in the 2023 XFL. But, there's always a chance 12 months out from an ACL that you may not be 100%. Deion Jackson, formerly of the Colts, who some of you guys may recognize from preseason, I think he got a few regular season touches as well. He should be working in there. And then I think Darius Higgins will be inactive. That's sort of how I have things priced right now. It wouldn't be shocking if Higgins was active over Deion Jackson, but I anticipate it'll be Jackson over Higgins. Either way, though, I think Abram Smith is going to get about 70% of backfield work here. And, obviously this is an offense that runs a ton of read option stuff and generally speaking wants to run the ball as much as possible. Last year, they were forced into throwing the ball. They fell behind a lot. If this game stays neutral script, though, they will really want to pound it with Abram Smith, a little bit of design stuff from Teamu. Where are you at on Smith? He's a little expensive. And like I said, he's tough to project because we just don't have an idea of his health. Oh, he's muted. We've fallen apart here in the final few minutes. Right. I tried to end the stream before we talked about DC. You were muted. I mean, this is rough.
I got Jake berated me in private chat for typing while on a stream. He said, Neil, you need to mute your fucking microphone. So that's the only, I never mute myself. So I'm not used to doing the mute thing. So I pulled a Scott Barrett there. I think that Abram Smith is a pretty strong contrarian play. He's a pay up to be contrarian, like clearly too expensive because we don't really know what to expect from him. But as a result, we're going to get him at fairly low ownership. And clearly, like we've seen the upside that Abram Smith can have. It would make sense for them to try to run the ball, slow the game down, keep it close as big underdogs. Now usually you don't want to take the running back on a big underdog, but maybe they can keep it close, and maybe that is their game plan to try to keep it close. So I actually think Abram Smith is a pretty strong play at 9,000, somebody that I would want to be overweight to, where we have him at pretty minimal ownership. And then Deion Jackson, I mean, also just 5,000 where we don't really know the split. I probably wouldn't play those two together, but I think both are like individually decent plays at low ownership. If they were getting any kind of ownership, I'd be out, but just because they are pretty contrarian, I think both make for pretty strong plays. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I really do like the ownership on Abram Smith, and we know he has nuclear upside. I mean, this is a guy who can rip off long runs, could push for 20 plus carries if the game script stays positive or neutral. So, if Abram Smith comes in at 4 or 5%, I certainly wouldn't mind having 10 to 15% myself. Wide receiver, I feel like there's only 3 or 4 guys I'm interested in. The main one is Ty Scott, who was tremendously efficient, ranked top 5 last year in both first downs per route run and yards per route run, which is a really great sign for just the receiver's overall skill. He looked good on film, and I fully expect him to be sort of the main cog in DC's passing offense. He will be joined by Chris Rowland and what I expect to be Jaden Mickens, formerly of the Buccaneers, in the slot. The slot role is pretty valuable overall. The problem is that if it's anything like last year when it was Roland and Kiki Cutie, who is also an NFL talent, it's probably going to be split up between those two guys, which is tricky. Roland was one of DC's, just excluding DC, one of the most targeted players inside the 10-yard line last year. So they do like to, try to get him some opportunities to score touchdowns. He also played a little bit of running back for DC last year. So, between those two slot options, I would prefer Roland, but I do really worry that his upside is capped if Jaden Mickens ends up running, say, 40% of the routes. That's pretty tough. Only other guy I wanted to throw out there was Cornell Powell, former 5th-round draft pick out of Clemson. Last year we saw, generally speaking, DC really wanted to have 2 full-time outside wide receivers. I think Cornell Powell is the favorite to occupy one of those roles. Now, there were a handful of games last season where Vincent Smith was running 90% of the routes and just did absolutely nothing. That would certainly be a problem. But at 4,600, we have him as a decent value. I don't mind taking some shots on Powell. Those are really the only guys worth noting in this passing offense. Neil, do you have anything to add on these wide receivers?
No, I think that is a good rundown. Ty Scott, I like him. He's getting 29% ownership though, so I think that's efficient ownership for Ty Scott. Yeah, Powell, you piqued my interest. Super Bowl champion, right? He was on the Chiefs, if I'm remembering right, or am I
think so.
completely
Yeah.
honest? Yeah,
One of a handful of Super Bowl champions in the UFL.
Yeah. So 4,600, yeah, worth a shot just in case he is that starting outside receiver. Yeah, I think you did a good breakdown. None of them like Powell, fairly contrarian and cheap, so I kind of like that as a shot. Jaden Mickens, 4,200, not getting much ownership, kind of intriguing. It's kind of a big unknown, I'd say, outside of Ty Scott, which I think for week one UFL, like that's kind of a good place to just take some shots, not to take a 30% stand, but like maybe a slight overweight approach on some of these guys.
Yeah, really don't mind it, especially when they're all so cheap, even rolling, just 5,500. So, all of those guys could be argued as decent values this week. Alrighty, guys, we talked for an hour and 40 minutes about 4 UFL games. This was absolutely awesome. Like I said, real honor to be able to do this for you guys and provide this content. All updates on, anything I do regarding projections, player props, anything I change in my article, that will be posted in Discord. So definitely buy the UFL package or the all-in package. Hop in our paywall Discord if you have the chance. But until then, we will see you guys at the top of the leaderboards. What?
Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.